Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am joined here, as always, by the man who is in shambles that Luka might be out first round here. We're recording this during Game 7. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good. Actually, you know what? I have a rant today.
Okay.
I think this is underrated is how bad car dealerships at estimating times. They're almost as bad as meteorology with their accuracy. Like, honestly, every time I go to a car dealership, I'm estimated 1:30, and then I'm out 2 hours later. I don't understand it. We need this fixed. How is these estimations so bad?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like this is kind of almost like a very like open mic night style of like what's the deal with car dealership time? But like I know what you mean. There's nothing more infuriating for me. It's like I've had to fix my internet like 3 times in the past week. Or not week, past month. Like it just kept going wrong. I don't know what they were doing, but every single time it's like, okay, it'll be there from 10 to 11, and it's like an hour late. It's like you gave me an hour window, and you couldn't hit that. Like, how are you this far off?
Yeah, I mean, internet is just atrocious. There was actually a time when I first moved to Georgia. It was actually on my birthday. Funny enough, they told me that they told me between 9 and 2, which is like the most vague thing ever, that it's like a 5-hour window or whatever that is. And then they showed up at 6 o'clock at night. So they couldn't even make the 5-hour window they gave themselves. I mean, it's so egregious how they estimate these times, and they're always way off. Do better, America.
Okay. That's when Kyle runs for president, that'll be his first promise in office. All right. Well, that was enough rambling. Let's get into the football. Let's talk about Kyle. There's an actual news to talk about, something that actually happened. The Julio Jones is a Tennessee Titan. We're just so everyone. Oh, actually, before we get into it, I should probably set everything up. If you guys want to listen to the audio only podcast, you can check that out. The audio only version is available anywhere you get your podcast. Check that out. You can also follow us on Twitter. Kyle, let them know where they can find us.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. That's at Jackson Kruger. Subscribe to his YouTube channel below. Follow me at by Kyle Grondin. That's GRONDIN at by Kyle Grondin on Twitter. Or make sure to follow the account page. That's at On the Sideline JK on Twitter. Once again, that's at On the Sideline JK.
Yes, and we're going to get into, we have an interesting idea for a show, I think, where we're going to talk about the most disappointing thing of 2020 for every team. And also, before we get into that, there was the big news that happened today. Julio Jones, a Tennessee Titan. I already kind of made a quick general thoughts video on this channel. But Kyle, what do you think about this move for the Titans?
I really thought that this offseason separated the Colts from the Titans up until this point. I really thought that they had a much better offseason. Not only just retaining guys, but also adding guys like Wentz, who I think can have a bounce back year with their offense. But with the Titans adding this, it's essentially turned into losing guys like losing Corey Davis, losing Arthur Smith, losing Adoree Jackson, even though I think there's more than that than like what's led on, to now basically upgrading from Corey Davis to Julio Jones. So I mean, that's a great get. I mean, if Julio Jones is healthy, this is the best duo in the NFL, right?
It's up there. It's certainly up there. I mean, you still have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I think that's very good. I think that I would put Julio above either of those guys, but I think I'd put either of those guys above A.J. Brown. But it's a very good 1-2 combo, and especially when you add on.
Yeah, the Lockett Metcalf one is underrated too. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's good. I think I probably would have. I'm not sure if it's better than those two, but that's up there. There's probably someone I'm not thinking of right at the moment, but Tyreek Hill and whoever you want to put next to him, that's a pretty good combo. but as a whole, I mean, really, I think the most deadly thing that I think about with this is that you have Derrick Henry, who basically forces you into zone. But it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to play zone coverage when there's A.J. Brown and Julio Jones and one safety deep. Oop, spill my drink a little. I'm so excited about this development. But then, like, if you want to play man coverage, which you saw sometimes teams would do on like a 3rd down and 10, well, now you got to contend with Julio Jones. They now have someone who can win consistently in man coverage. This Titans offense, I think, really shot up, and like I really believe it. I think Julio Jones probably adds like at least a win to this team just by himself.
Yeah, I mean, the two big things is obviously he's got to stay healthy, and We'll see how the legs hold up. I think I was looking at it. Wide receiver legs typically hold up to about 35, which means he's still got, 2 or 3 good years left in him. So that shouldn't be an issue. But, he did have some wear and tear on him last year. So if he's healthy, though, this is now maybe the most dangerous offense in the NFL. And it was already really good last year. And I just imagine that play action set that they have. And they were screaming, Corey Davis just came across the middle wide open every time. That's going to be Julio Jones now. That's insane.
I mean, and can't you just imagine? Can't you just like easily see like Julio Jones takes one of those crossing routes over the middle against the play action, just stiff arms a safety and just goes for 75 yards. Like we can already see that happening.
Yeah, and as Swift Stealth here points out, as the Jaguars fan, I'm screwed. There's another variable to this. They play the Texans and the Jaguars twice a season. That's 4 games against the 2 worst secondaries in the league. Like they're going to score 100 points in one of those games if they keep it. How is either of those teams guarding him?
Yeah, exactly. And about the injury thing, it is somewhat fair, but as a whole, he had stayed pretty healthy up until last year, and it's he was on pace. I think a lot of people don't realize this, but he was on pace for 1,400 yards last year. But if it wasn't for the injury, just if you look at his snap count, so he was still as effective as ever. And I also have to say, everyone keeps saying, I hear Packers fans saying, it's like, oh, well, we couldn't have afforded him. The Titans entered today with the 4th least amount of payroll. You can find ways to afford someone. The only teams that had less payroll than the Titans were the Buccaneers, the Saints, and the Falcons, 3 NFC South teams. Other than that, the Titans were 4th worst. They still find a way to make it work. You can make it work in the NFL. You can find ways to push the can down the road. So I don't really buy into that.
Yeah, I looked into this a lot because I wanted the Patriots to get him, first of all. And the second thing was I also wrote about it, which if you want to go to GuyBostonSports.com to read that, you could. A lot of it that has to do with Jones. The first thing I looked at is a lot of the advanced numbers on him were basically the same. So it was just production was down because of, like you said, snap count was the only thing that made the difference. Now the tough thing is that sometimes leg injuries could stick around, especially as you hit past 30, so we're hoping that doesn't. But like you said, he's been pretty much healthy his entire career, so I'm not overly worried about it. But yeah, I mean, NFL contracts are BS. I keep saying this. Anyone worried about contracts, unless it's like a fully guaranteed quarterback contract, NFL contracts are complete nonsense. You don't have to worry about them ever. You just, like you said, you restructure it, or you basically can turn it into guaranteed dollars that basically moves the cap number. They're all BS. The salary cap is complete nonsense. I'm done having this conversation about cap numbers because I just think any team can do whatever they want when they want to figure it out. There's way too many loopholes into the salary cap that any team can basically figure it out, besides like the Eagles.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts on the Julio Jones trade? Do you want to get into the main topic of this podcast?
We're still early. I guess we'll end it real quick with this. Who's your favorite in the AFC South?
Again, I want to do a little bit more research into this, but probably the Titans, probably still Tennessee. I think that there still is the Carson Wentz, who I think we're both higher on than most, but that's still I think I drafted him like 19th in the quarterback draft, and that was considered high because there is still such a huge risk factor there. There isn't that risk factor for me for Tannehill. And when you have potential volatility at the quarterback position, it's hard to. But again, maybe I'll look into it and feel differently once we do our divisional rankings.
Yeah, that's fair. I still have questions about Tennessee's defense, but I mean, I love that offense last year, and I don't imagine them changing too much even with Arthur Smith gone because they just have seen that it works. So I think it's going to be an electric scoring team next season.
Yeah, exactly. They're just going to we're going to run the same 7 plays that Arthur Smith ran. He figured it out. We're just going to follow him. I think it'll be pretty easy. All right, let's get into the meat of this podcast. The way it's going to work is I'm going to start things off. We're going to talk about our team. I'm going to do the NFC. Kyle is going to do the AFC. So I'm going to be giving what my pick is for the most disappointing thing about each team. It could be a player, could be a positional grouping, could be something else. Just I left it purposely vague. Just the most disappointing thing. And we'll start off with the Washington Balls. I think the answer has to be Dwayne Haskins here. There was still some potential hope that he could find something in his second year under a new coach, and now he's completely off the team. There's several ways you can go with this, but I'm going to go with Dwayne Haskins as my most disappointing thing.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, the expectations in Washington last year with everything going on, there wasn't really a ton. And the hope was that basically maybe they can compete for the division if Haskins, develops a little. I think it was year two or year three. I think it was year two. I'm losing track already. But yeah, I
Year
mean,
two.
I think year two. So yeah, I thought the hope was basically that he develops and then maybe they can compete for a division title. Well, they competed for a division title without him developing at all. So I think you have to feel pretty good about basically everything else besides that. There wasn't a whole lot of expectations for this offense because of, just the lack of overall talent, especially at skill position besides McLaurin. So I thought it was a good year overall, but yeah, Haskins was a complete bust, but kudos to them for recognizing it and getting rid of him.
Yeah, and so now to have Fitzmagic, who will lead them to 17-0, we can plow right ahead here. Because again, some of these things, there's not a lot. Some of these teams, they kind of had good things happen, so there's not a lot of like real things to talk about for disappointments. For the Giants here, I'm actually going to stick with quarterback. I'm going to go Daniel Jones. Again, he was someone who had a much better rookie season than Haskins, but his second year wasn't exactly fantastic, and some people, I think, would have moved off of him after his second year. There still is some hope, but he definitely didn't have the second year that you wanted to see your rookie quarterback have.
Yeah, and, very rarely in the NFL nowadays do you see teams this patient on development tracks for quarterbacks, especially when there's flashes where you're like, okay, this is really enticing to see. Obviously, there's the talent there. But the consistency and, the NFL is a turnover-led league. If you can't take care of the ball, that's a huge issue. And unfortunately, that's his biggest issue. So we'll see how much, I feel like this is kind of a make or break year for Daniel Jones, even though I don't think the offensive line is going to be that much better. But, he's got to show that he can take care of the football because there is talent there outside of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Also, I should mention, if you're watching the YouTube version, you might see Kyle and my eyes drift off a bit. We're keeping an eye on the basketball game. Again, why Game 7 on at 3:30? No idea why they're doing that. I did not expect that when we set up this podcast. But yeah, and again, the Giants, another team, had kind of an up year. This is one of the disappointments, and it's not even the worst disappointment that could happen. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. I gotta go Mike McCarthy here. I think this is just he all this hype when he comes back. It's like, oh, he spent the whole offseason. He got a Pro Football Focus account. He's now all of a sudden this super analytical genius, and he promptly just seemingly fell over his own 2 feet the entire season. It looked more like he was just Green Bay McCarthy right before he got fired. He is my biggest disappointment for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't even, because I bought into some of the hype. I was like, maybe this is a little better. And it wasn't even just that it was bad. It was so catastrophically bad that I thought it was a problem, and, I don't know how much all the reports are saying, but, there were reports that the locker room wasn't happy with the direction of the franchise, all this stuff. And I know we dealt with a lot of injuries, but there's still not a lot of other things to be optimistic, and especially about McCarthy and this regime. We'll see if it can get any better. Maybe they get healthy this season, but I'm still not excited for the future of the Cowboys with him at the helm.
Yeah, and again, like some of this stuff too, like if Mike McCarthy turns it around his second year, I don't think this will be an aged poorly thing, because it's not a prediction on him as a coach, although I'm not really big on that either. But it's more so just like, I don't think you can have watched that first season and said, you know what? I was pleasantly surprised of Mike McCarthy. I just don't think anyone can say that.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll see what happens with him. He's going to be on the hot seat this year just because of how disappointing last season was, even though it's only year 2.
Yeah. Speaking of the hot seat, 2 guys who are no longer even on the team for the Eagles. I have a pick for this one. Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz both end up being the most biggest disappointment. I couldn't really decide to 2 of them. If I had to choose, I'd probably choose Wentz, because there were already kind of some rumblings of Peterson making some mistakes. But Wentz went from like a top 10 quarterback to off the team and basically just given up on by the Eagles. Also, Doug Peterson, obviously a Super Bowl winning coach who I think was in the top 10 in our coaching rankings. He's off the team as well. So huge fall from grace. And you could maybe even make the argument that like the receiving core was kind of a big root of both of these 2 problems and made it look worse. But those are going to be my biggest disappointment there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it was top 10. I'm pretty sure I had Peterson top 5 last season. So,
Maybe.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it was such of a mess of a franchise, and the salary cap's not making it look any better for this season. I think it's a rough time to be an Eagles fan, honestly, and that was just a bad situation for the entire team.
Yeah, but hey, like we sort of like what we talked about with the Titans of go all in when they won a Super Bowl. You can deal with a few, but the bad years won't sting as badly if you never won a ring to begin with.
Didn't they boo their team like week 1 after winning the Super Bowl? So
They
I don't
did,
think they feel that way.
but that's Philly. They don't mean that's not a bad thing. That's just like, oh no, you had a bad first half, so boo. But they don't. It's different.
Yeah, fair enough. So
When you go, oh man, that was kind of disappointing. Philly just boos. Like that's the difference between this Philly and every other person.
yeah, fair enough.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that this is turned in. This was a team that looked optimistic a couple years ago, like you were saying, obviously winning the Super Bowl. To
Mhm.
now, this looks like a 3 or 4 year plan. So we'll see what happens in Philly going forward. But yeah, I feel like they got a few steps to go.
Yeah. Green Bay Packers now moving on to the NFC North. This to me, this is a tough one, right? Because they had a good year. They were nearly into the Super Bowl, so it wasn't a lot of like horrible, disappointing things about them. I'm gonna go with I could have just gone with the field goal attempt at the end of this NFC Championship game, but I'm gonna go with Kevin King. I think there was still some hope for Kevin King to become like a decent corner, and not only does he really stick up the joint, he ends up being a key reason why they lost the NFC Championship game. So Kevin King, my most disappointing thing of 2020.
And I think the Packers agree with you because the first thing they did was get a cornerback with speed to replace him because you clearly saw the speed wasn't there when they really needed it to. And so that's something that they're addressing and changing. So now that they have a guy in Eric Stokes that they feel like that they can rely on with speed at that position, it's pretty clear that they weren't comfortable with what they had.
They also did re-sign Kevin King.
Well, yeah, but I mean, at the same time, drafting a quarterback in round 1 says you need a replacement.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that it was kind of a weird thing, but yeah, when you cost your team potentially a Super Bowl championship, that's usually disappointing.
Yeah, no, I agree. So
All right. Chicago Bears. Again, there wasn't a lot of disappointment. They kind of exceeded expectations a little bit. There wasn't a ton of expectation to begin with. It's like, I could say like Nick Foles, but I feel like no one really expected Nick Foles to do anything. So that would be kind of weird. I'm going to go with Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn signed a 5-year, $70 million contract, $30 million guaranteed in the offseason and only had 2 sacks in about 600 snaps. So he did get playing time. Didn't have a ton of production. It's not horrible. This isn't an awful disappointment, but it was a bit disappointing. And again, we have to find something disappointing about every team.
yeah, no, I mean, I think I agree. I think there's a few different. You could have gone with the offensive line, but like you said, there wasn't crazy expectations on that offensive line. It
hmm
just was, bad. So I think there is a few things you could have gone with. I think Nagy could have been under consideration too for
hmm
not being able to figure out things with that offense. But yeah, I mean, when you're paying a guy that kind of money, you expect more production than that.
Especially when he's on that defensive line.
Yeah, he should have a lot of opportunities to get after the quarterback.
Right. All right. We'll now move on. Staying with this division, going to have the Vikings. Vikings, another one where I think the biggest disappointment was just injuries, but I didn't want to go with that. I tried to not do injuries unless I absolutely had to. And so I'm going to go with Jeff Gladney here. He was their first round corner who did not have a great rookie season. I didn't expect much from Gladney. He was kind of one of those guys that when I watched film on him, I didn't really get. I wasn't sure why people were into him. And I think that he's proven me right to this point in his career, which is disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly didn't look the part of a guy who's going to be in the NFL for long term, but at the same time, it's a tough position to, adjust to year 1 in the NFL. I think he's going to get more chances, but at the same time, it certainly isn't promising.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you could even say like maybe Kirk Cousins, but I thought Kirk Cousins, had a couple bad games, but played really good. He was Kirk Cousins. He had a couple bad games and played pretty well throughout the most of the game. His statistics were actually pretty good. So, I mean, the only other thing I thought of was maybe like you could argue Stephon Diggs was disappointing because of how well he played once they traded him, but they got Jefferson who played better. So really, I thought Gladney's the only option here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't really. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think that there was a lot of problems with Minnesota other than that their secondary stunk, which is, they had two really good safeties. Just the corners were really bad in that team. So it's got to be someone there.
Yeah, and even Dantzler, their third round pick, played well when he got time in there towards the end of the season. It was a lot of it was injuries too up front, but we'll go to the Detroit Lions. I'm sticking with first round corner Jeff Okudah. You spent a number 3 overall pick on him, and he didn't look that great. There still is some hope for Okudah. Again, first round corners, a lot of times they have a bad rookie year, or corners in general just sometimes have a bad rookie year, develop their second year. But still, you would have hoped to see a little bit more flashes than you ended up getting with Okudah.
Yeah, this was really frustrating, I think, for Lions fans because the expectations were so high on him. And, it probably was a little unfair that he got comparisons to guys like Ramsey and all that, but he was picked at the same level as those guys. So you expect that sort of production. Maybe it turns around now that he is away from Matt Patricia and that, dumpster fire. But at the same time, I think he's got a long way to go, and he doesn't look the part of the number 3 overall pick.
I like this comment. I went back and saw your old videos, bro. You were a Patriots fan, and now you're a Buccaneers fan. You are incorrect. I don't know what you're talking about. I have never been a Patriots fan. So that's a weird comment.
I'm a Patriots fan.
Yeah, maybe you got us confused.
I've always been a Patriots fan.
Yeah. All right. Well, love comments like that. Get mad at something for just something that's not true whatsoever. We'll move on to new division now. Let's talk about my Tampa Bay Buccaneers that I've been a fan of for my entire life. I'm going to go, not a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about, not a lot of disappointments about this team, right? You win a Super Bowl. There's not too many things that go wrong. The only real thing I thought of was Keyshawn Vaughn. He was a third round rookie running back who didn't really do much, could barely get on the field in a position that wasn't necessarily a big strength. So, he was disappointing. Again, they won a Super Bowl. I'm not that disappointed, but he's my pick there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There wasn't a whole lot to really complain about for the Buccaneers, obviously winning the Super Bowl. So, I can agree with that because I had expectations for Vaughn because I thought he was so good at Vanderbilt. But obviously, it's year one, so I'll give him more opportunities. And the big thing with playing for Brady as a running back is you got to be able to pass block, and that was something that I thought Tampa Bay, until Fournette really settled into the role, struggled with overall from their other running backs, and so that's something he's probably going to have to get better at to be on the field.
Yeah, this was a team that I literally had to think for a while what was disappointing because pretty much everything worked out.
Yeah, I don't even know what else I'd pick. Maybe the special teams? Didn't they have some issues in special teams this year?
You could argue special teams, yeah, maybe like the punt, but again, their kick return, their kicking was great. It was just the kick return, punt return, stuff like that. You could argue that, and that was only against the Saints too. All 3 games against them, but only against the Saints. So I don't know, but yeah, not a lot. You can Bruce Arians is play calling in the first half. There just wasn't that much you can.
Yeah, first down carries for 2 yards.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. I went with how Drew Brees played after his injury. I think that was, you hope that you could have one final ride with Brees, and it didn't work out, and he was really bad in that Tampa Bay game.
Yeah, I was really disappointed for him, obviously, and the injuries carry it. The injuries are harder when you're that age and at that level. So obviously, it was disappointing for him and frustrating for the team that they weren't able to get it done. Because as you were talking about the Eagles, that they kind of went all in for those Super Bowls. This team kind of went all in and didn't get it. They had 3 or 4 chances, honestly, and they weren't able to get it done. So that's frustrating for them as a whole. And part of it was Brees not being himself when he came back.
Yeah, I think they had, if I remember the stat correctly, it was the most wins ever in a 4-year stretch by a team that didn't make the Super Bowl. And in fairness, there was that Rams game where they probably should have made the Super Bowl, but still, in terms of this season especially, you would have loved to see if Brees lose 54-51 and then retire, but to have him go out, basically costing his team potentially their last real chance at a Super Bowl run. It's tough, gotta be tough for Saints fans.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a frustrating thing for them. And, we'll see how this Saints future goes over these next couple of years as they retool this roster.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. We're going to go again, another team where they kind of exceeded expectations in a lot of ways. So I don't have a ton to sit here and say oh, that was disappointing. But the one thing I thought of would be Teddy Bridgewater. There was kind of they did pay him hoping that he could be a pretty good starting caliber quarterback. He ended up being kind of a below average, so maybe like that, around that 30 range. We talk about like low tier starter, high tier backup kind of guy. So he's the disappointment. Again, there's not a lot here. Pretty much everything that we thought was going to be bad was bad, and everything that we thought that was going to be good was good, and then they exceeded expectations in some areas.
Yeah, the only thing that was Christian McCaffrey, but that was because of injury, not because of his performance. So, that was the only frustrating part for Carolina, and this was a team that honestly I thought was going to be a lot worse. So I thought they exceeded expectations, but nothing really you can say about that. They took a low risk on a quarterback, and it didn't really work out the way they were hoping. Now they're taking another kind of low risk on a quarterback, even though they paid a little bit more this time around for Darnold. So nothing to complain about.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to think about, like, oh man, nothing really was disappointing this year for the Panthers, and they won 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this was a team I thought might be the worst in the league.
Yeah, so I guess you could also write the Christian McCaffrey injury could also be a factor there. But let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. I went Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn for the Atlanta Falcons. That's what I'm going. Again, not that there were super high expectations, but I had higher expectations than what happened.
Yeah, that feels fairly obvious. Like, it's just like the whole situation with Quinn was just bad. The defense didn't improve, which is something that he's known for. So I don't really know like how else to describe it. He just didn't. Everything that you expected from him didn't work out. So frustrating thing from Dan Quinn, and that's it felt obvious, like you said.
Yeah, and again, they're a team where, like, what else went wrong? Not a ton. We didn't have super high expectations, but the defense was poorly coached at times. And when you're a defensive guru, gotta fix that. Let's go to, speaking of defense, with the Seattle Seahawks. I'm just going defense in general. The defense was the issue because we thought that this secondary could be the best secondary in football. It was not that. It was the worst defense for like the first half of the season. They got into a bit of a groove towards the end of the year, but I do think that heading into the season, they completely missed the expectations with their defense.
I thought the defensive line was better when Dunlap came. But I mean, overall, yeah, I mean, there was much higher expectations for this defense to perform well, and it just clearly didn't. So frustrating for the Seahawks, and I still don't understand what happened with this secondary. It just wasn't good, and it wasn't good with all that talent on the team.
Yeah, well, and part of me, it just kind of makes me wonder. It's like that Seattle cover 3 scheme. It might just not be the right scheme to run anymore in today's NFL.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it might be that situation unless you have a guy like 2013 Earl Thomas definitely helps. But when you don't have him patrolling the back, it makes it a lot harder to perform at that level.
Yeah, I agree. We'll go to the Rams now. Rams, I'm going with another guy who's no longer on the team, Jared Goff. When you get kicked off the team, usually it's because you were disappointing. We had high hopes for Jared Goff, I thought. I mean, there was that year that they went to the Super Bowl. He played like a top 5 quarterback that year, and really did not ever, kind of just fell back down to earth. Was not great last year. Had way too many mistakes. He just never really improved those dumb post-snap decisions, and now he's no longer a Los Angeles Ram.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to describe it. Obviously, they traded him. Sean McVay was kind of over the Jared Goff experience, and they felt like they got a clear upgrade in Matt Stafford. So, if your team feels like they need to upgrade you, that probably means you weren't helping the team win football games. I think the only other thing could be argued would be like first half of the season, Cam Akers, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But then again, it's like he played well towards the end of the stretch. So it's like I wasn't like disappointed with Cam Akers in terms of the entire season. So you can say that, but I thought he played well in the second half.
Yeah, he redeemed himself, so that's fair. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be Goff, though, because, it's clear now for a couple of years that he might have been holding them back from winning championships.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, again, that Super Bowl wasn't great. We all know that. For the Cardinals, Arizona Cardinals, I have, again, it's kind of tough. I went with Cliff Kingsbury. Again, we kind of had hope that maybe Kingsbury could, now that he has DeAndre Hopkins, things could get really exciting. I still think I would like to see how things go with like a better receiving core in terms of like the 2 through whatever, but I also think there were just too many issues with Kingsbury, so that he's what I'm going with here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fair. It was definitely a frustrating season from him, especially from the play calling perspective. I think the offensive line was kind of disappointing, although I think the one argument against the offensive line was we kind of thought it'd be bad. So I guess that's the only other area you could probably go with.
Yeah. Also, Kyle, speaking of disappointing, looking tough for your boy Luka here.
Yeah, Clippers aren't missing right now. So, I mean, nothing they can do about that, especially if the other guys aren't hitting shots. So, nothing. Oh, well.
Yes, but we'll see. Maybe it'll be a miraculous comeback, and you'll get to hear it on the live on the podcast. Yeah, going on to my final team now to talk about, 49ers. Again, it's tough. The only real thing I could think of was just injuries, which I didn't want to. My goal was to not pick injuries for any of this, but I have to go injuries here because what else do you say? I mean, everyone who was healthy played about as well as I expected them to, if not better. They were just banged up last year.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would think about would be maybe Nick Mullins and Beathard too, because, as weird as it is to say, we thought this was one of the better backup quarterback rooms in the NFL, and they both were disappointing and beyond disappointing. They just didn't help the team win games. And this team, despite all of those injuries, was pretty close to a playoff spot. So that's certainly frustrating when, they couldn't come in and help them win.
Yeah. I think I agree. So, all right, that's the NFC. Went through it. Now we're going to go to the AFC. I'm not sure exactly how you formatted this. Maybe we should talk about this before the show. But you just say the team that you're going to say, and I'll put up the team on the graphic on the screen.
I'm going, just for reference, I'm going east, north, south, then west. I think that's the same direction you went in, basically. So we're starting with the north, or the east. Sorry, I just messed it up already. AFC East. We're starting with the New York Jets. I have everything but Marcus May.
Yeah.
I guess I could honestly say Sam Darnold because he got traded because he was so bad. But I mean, honestly, anything but Marcus May. Marcus May gets a pass because he was still pretty good on this team, despite everything around him. But yeah, it was a rough season for Jets fans, and I think that's a very fair thing, other than just saying Adam Gase or Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I think that's, obviously it's a bit hyperbolic. Like Quinnen Williams, I think, had a good, year. There's a few guys you can talk about, but I agree. This was not a great year for the poor New York Jets. Granted, there is no such thing as a great year for the Jets, it seems. The last one was 69, but still.
Yeah, I mean, at least, the problem is that it just wasn't even like competitive,
Right.
I mean, that's certainly frustrating. So there's obviously, the entire coaching staff, whether it was Greg Williams, whether it was Adam Gase, obviously is probably the more realistic answer. But yeah, I mean, there just wasn't a lot going right for the Jets last season, as we all know. And they couldn't even get the number one pick out of it.
Yeah, I was about to say, some people might say the most disappointing thing was winning the last two games.
Yeah, no kidding. So, yeah. We'll move on here to the Dolphins. I tried to avoid rookies for the most part. I ended up putting a couple in here, and this is the first one. And honestly, it was Tua Tagovailoa because I was thinking about the offensive line, but the problem is so PFF heading into the season ranked it as the 32nd worst offensive line. It's not really disappointing when you're expecting bad results to begin with, in my opinion. So I'm just going to go with Tua because this was the team in a position to make the playoffs, and they got worse with him in the game. And unfortunately, that's only year one, and I know he's probably going to get better, and it's probably going to get better in the long run. But for 2020, that's got to be the most disappointing thing.
Yeah. Kenneth Lee also says the real thing for the Jets should be Peyton Manning for suggesting Adam Gase. That should be that's very good.
That's a fair one.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I mean, we had really high hopes for Tua. Some people had Tua as their favorite quarterback out of this draft class. So for him to kind of come in and not really be that great, when you also saw two quarterbacks of this draft class be dominant, one who was selected one pick later in Justin Herbert, like it's a tough one. It's a rookie season. There's still a lot of time left. But again, it's not saying that Tua won't be successful, just that he was disappointing as a rookie.
Yeah, I think he is going to get better, but obviously a frustrating thing, which will transition to the Buffalo Bills here. This was another one that, there wasn't a whole lot disappointing. Obviously, this was a great year from the Bills. I went with the running game. You had Singletary and you drafted Zach Moss too. This was a team that you thought would be a pretty good running football team. And, we didn't really expect Josh Allen to hit this level and make this sort of improvement and these sort of strides. And I think the offense turned a little one-dimensional because these guys just couldn't get a rhythm on the ground. I think Singletary and Moss were definitely frustrating this season. And yeah, so I'm going to go with the running game for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They're another team that qualifies in the not too much disappointing to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is one of their better seasons in a while. They're in the AFC Championship game and in the conversation for a Super Bowl contender. And I do think Moss is going to get better, which obviously helps this team get in the position to potentially win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. All right. You want to move on to your team, the Patriots?
Yeah, the Patriots were another tough team because I thought there was some expectations, but at the same time, I think I just got to go with Sony Michel here. I know he battled injuries, but he just looked like, when you watched him play, he felt like the fourth worst running back out there. He looked worse than Burkhead. He looked worse when he was out there than Damian Harris and what's his name too? James White too, my bad. He looked worse and less explosive than those guys out there. Even JJ Taylor had moments. And it just felt like, we were waiting for Sony Michel to just show anything. And it just looks like his knees aren't really where they need to be an NFL running back. And, it's unfortunate, but, they drafted him in the first round and there was expectations for that. They drafted him over Lamar Jackson, which is another conversation that Patriots fans are going to have for a long time. And even though he was great in that Super Bowl run in 2018, it certainly hasn't looked the part since.
Yeah, and the Patriots being my former favorite team, apparently, I know a thing or two about them. What about N'Keal Harry? I feel like he could have been a good choice here.
I guess, yeah. I mean, the thing is I kind of felt like that was a lost cause beforehand.
Gotcha.
I watched him play, but that's the thing too. Is so you look at that, that's certainly disappointing. I also considered the secondary here because it was viewed as like a top 5 secondary, and it didn't play at a top 5 level. But at the same time, to say, oh, it's not the best secondary in football, it's disappointing. That seems harsh because it was still one of the better parts of the team. But yeah, I mean, I kind of had given up in Harry at this point, where I still had some hope for Sony Michel to recover.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Maybe I had different expectations for those two. All right, moving on to the next division. Where are you going here?
All right, so we're going with the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm going with the play calling, especially on the offensive side of the ball. This was definitely something that had been talked about all year. Guys calling out plays. Obviously, the injuries are another thing that adds to this, and that could have been talked about. But, there's only so much you can do about injuries. And I think the play call on the offensive side of the ball was a real problem. We talked about Greg Roman as maybe one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. And then all of a sudden it looked like he almost was out of a job by the end of the season. So that's certainly frustrating for the Ravens in there. They felt like they took a step back on that side on the way to trying to win a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I think probably what I would maybe say would be how badly not having a great receiving core impacted them. I think that might be the way I would phrase it. I agree with you on the play calling, but I also think that that's another factor there.
Yeah, Hollywood Brown was or is he no longer Hollywood? Because now I see Marquise Brown everywhere. Did he give up the Hollywood nickname?
I think he's always gone by both. Like, I don't think he's ever officially gone by Hollywood Brown, but just people call him that.
Oh, well, Marquise Brown was another guy I considered too.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's kind of like an Ocho Cinco thing, where it's like a lot of people call him Ocho Cinco, but back when he was still named Chad Johnson, you still could call him Chad Johnson.
Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, he was in the conversation too. Obviously, he didn't look like he developed a whole lot. So it was a tough season for Ravens fans on the offensive side of the ball, I thought.
Yeah. Unless they were playing Cleveland. Where do you want to go with here? Do you want to go with Cleveland?
Yeah, I'll go Cleveland. This one just felt like the secondary. And it felt pretty obvious to me because they addressed it so heavily in free agency this offseason, because this has been a masterclass by this front office to be able to have this ability to have financial flexibility and have a great team. And they addressed it immediately. This was the first thing they did. They added Troy Hill and James Johnson. So this was obviously something they felt serious about. And it held the team back, I felt like, at points.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge issue with this one also. They did have some injuries, but yeah, I mean, it's tough to win games when you can't cover.
Yeah, there's really not much else you can really talk about. This was a great season for Cleveland. They're loving this team right now.
Yeah, agreed. All right, where are you going next?
We'll go to Pittsburgh with this one. I'm going to go with the offensive line and running game. This just didn't seem like it was working at all. And, they let some of the offensive linemen go. This was a team that had a good offensive line for a number of years, and they felt confident with it. The offensive line definitely struggled this season and was very disappointing. And in turn, James Conner was very disappointing. This was the guy they were kind of relying on this year. And they immediately addressed it with a running back in the first round, whether you agree with it or not. And they changed their offensive line. So these are definitely things they felt like were two major issues that, held the team back once they started the year undefeated.
Yeah, I agree. How many times did we see them try to run it on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 and just not get it? It seemed like every game they missed that. Like every one of their losses came down to them not being able to convert a 3rd down and 1 when they tried to run it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely a frustrated season for Pittsburgh. And especially when they started so promising and it looked like all of these receivers, it's like, how do you guard this team? Well, you force it to run the ball because they can't get it. So,
right.
It definitely is something that they had to change, and they did.
Yeah, some people would say Roethlisberger maybe, but I feel like, there was already so much turmoil heading into the season with Roethlisberger. We didn't know how good he was going to be given the fact that he was coming back from injury. So I wouldn't say it was a disappointing season from him.
No, and I felt like, he was good enough to put him in position to win games. Although I wasn't overly impressed with him this season, he put him in positions to win games. Now, I felt like the running game put them in position to fail because they had to throw the ball so much, whether it was short crossing routes or really anything. I thought it was a running game. Yeah,
I'm with you. Cincinnati, what do you got?
I got Zach Taylor for this one. I felt like this was a guy, they talked about, oh, well, he needs his quarterback. He needs his offense run with a good quarterback at his disposal. He gets Joe Burrow, and the first thing he does when he knows this was another team heading into the 2020 season, I believe PFF had the Bengals as the 31st best offensive line heading into the season. So there wasn't expectations on that offensive line. And then I don't know, it felt like, he got hurt on like a naked rollout, basically. Why are you running those set of plays when you know what your offensive line is? It was in a position to fail for Burrow and a position for Burrow to get hurt, which I feel like is just unacceptable for this guy who's supposed to be this offensive mastermind because he had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay.
Yeah, seriously, I got to find a way to meet Sean McVay. My career opportunities will go way up.
I mean, honestly, and maybe Zach Taylor, if he moves back to the offense side of the ball as a coach, is better. But as a head coach and as a guy who they said, oh well, he just needs his quarterback to figure things out. He found his quarterback, but he didn't put his quarterback in a position to stay healthy and be successful. And that's just as important as putting him in position to succeed by throwing the ball, where they like it. You got to make sure that you have the right offense that's protecting him too, and he didn't have that.
Yeah, and really what it comes down to is, when you've coached for 2 years, you finish bottom 5 both years, 1 year bottom 1, that's tough.
Yeah. So I don't know how long Zach Taylor is going to last in the NFL, but we'll see what happens. I just felt like it was frustrating, and he was putting Burrow in a position to get hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been talks about that too, about how all of those empty backfield stuff gave him a lot more hits than he needed.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the AFC South here. The Titans, I'll start with the Titans. This has got to be Jadeveon Clowney. This is a guy that, another team got, bamboozled by Clowney almost. Not that he was bad in Seattle. I thought he was good in Seattle when he was healthy. But, there was expectations that he would be solid on this team. And once again, we kind of seen that Jadeveon Clowney is kind of a tweener who's not really great at either spot. He struggles as an out, and as a 3-4 outside linebacker, and I think he struggles at times as a 3-4 defensive end. I think he's kind of this tweener who has this tantalizing talent, who's kind of stuck between positions.
I think Jadeveon Clowney is like the movie Avatar.
The movie Avatar? What?
Yeah,
how so?
With the blue people. Because I think it's pretty clear. I didn't realize I'd have to go into detail about it. I think that because I remember when Avatar came out, everyone was like, this is the greatest movie ever made. And then we all watched it and everyone's like, oh no, this movie sucks. Like, it doesn't suck. It's just not the greatest movie ever made. That's Clowney. I don't think he's horrible. He's just not what people thought he was going to be when he got drafted. And he still has this, he got this huge reputation, but now I kind of feel like he's a little bit underrated. I don't think he sucks. I think there's still some talent there.
I think that's fair, but I think you're expecting a lot more out of him than his production last year. This defense was bad, and part of it was that he would fix some of their issues, and he didn't really fix much of anything. And at that point, he was, free agency, Jadeveon Clowney is overrated. Mid-season, Jadeveon Clowney is probably underrated, is what I'd say.
Yeah, that might be fair. That might be a fair way to put it. But remember that one sack he had in college, or one play he had in college where he was unblocked?
I can never forget it. It's on every year.
Yeah, exactly. All right, where are we going next?
The Houston Texans. Bill
Ooh,
O'Brien.
gonna be tough to
Yeah.
find one here.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien, the GM, Bill O'Brien, the head coach. They both together are the most disappointing thing for the Texans this past season. I mean, this was just a mess of a roster and still is a mess of a roster after, the carnage of this team makes this still a mess of a roster. It's not getting better either. This was another one. I almost put everything but Deshaun Watson last year, but that felt like too harsh because there wasn't a lot of expectations for that defense. But yeah, I think Bill O'Brien just made this a complete mess, and there was no winning with this team. There was no chance.
And also in the past calendar year, I would say that Deshaun Watson easily the most disappointing thing about just NFL in general.
Yeah. So I mean, it's certainly a frustrating time to be Texans fans because I think Bill O'Brien did a lot more damage than people think. And while I haven't loved all the moves this new front office made, I think a lot of it is trying to repair some of the damage. So I think it's a tough time for Texans fans.
Yeah. Bill O'Brien did at least trade away Clowney got a second round pick out of that. He got that right.
Yeah. Well, he managed that. He managed 1 for 50. So
exactly. Yeah. It's always tough when you have a top 5 pick that you don't get to select yourself because you traded it away before the season. Especially tough when it's the second time you've done it.
Yeah. No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, what a time for Texans. So
yeah. The first time they at least got Deshaun Watson, but even so, again, not looking so great for the Texans. Let's move on.
All right. Indianapolis Colts here. This was another team I thought had a pretty good year, and there wasn't a whole lot to complain about. The defense was impressive. You can complain about the sacks, or was it? I think it was the turnovers, actually. But at the same time, it was still a great defense. T.Y. Hilton is who I'm going with. This was a guy who actually stayed relatively healthy. I think he played in 14 games this year when I was looking at it. And his numbers just across the board, besides, I think, touchdown catches, were down. His yards per catch, everything like that. I thought it was a disappointing year from T.Y., and they were kind of relying on him to be that number one guy, and he didn't look the part, even though he played in 14 games. So, yeah, I'm going to go with T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah, it's interesting. Still had 744 snaps. It's tough because, again, another team here where it's like, where else do you go with if not T.Y. Hilton? Because I don't think you can go Rivers here. Rivers didn't exactly Rivers probably at least met expectations. I think a lot of people thought he was washed up in his last year with the Chargers. He wasn't that. So yeah. I mean, I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah, like I said, I thought there was based on what this team was after Andrew Luck left, I don't think there was a whole lot to complain about that they got back and nearly won the division. They have one of the better coaches in the league. There wasn't a whole lot to go with. So I feel like T.Y. not looking like the number one receiver that they need, I thought was a little disappointing.
Yeah. And again, a little disappointment. That's probably enough for the Colts. Let's go to another team, the worst team in the league. So you probably have plenty to choose from here. Where are you going?
I'm just, they got what they wanted because they got the number one pick. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go with the front office with this one because it just put this team in a position to, they didn't want this team to succeed.
Did we lose Kyle? Okay.
Do you hear me? Okay. Yeah. So I went with the front office for this one because they just.
I think that we had some audio issues. Are you okay?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. It was weird how it was kind of like a lag, like you were saying something and then like you were like looking around, not moving. I think we're good. We're back now.
Okay, we're back live. All right. So I'm going with the front office for this one. I thought it was a little I just thought it was a disappointing season, and they wanted it to be a disappointing season. And that included things like trading Yannick Ngakoue and Ronnie Harrison for basically nothing. For cents on the dollar, basically, is what they traded them for. And they wanted this team to fail, and they got what they wanted. It's frustrating in that regard. But, yeah, I mean, they set this team up to be bad, and it was bad. So while they got what they wanted, I think it was disappointing for the 2020 season and their success.
Yeah. Also, the chat said that they could hear you fine. So it must have just been on my end that was going wrong for a second. But, yeah. I mean, I don't hate that. I don't hate. I guess that's totally fair. I mean, I guess you could make the argument. Some people would make the argument that the best thing to do if you don't win a Super Bowl is to finish where the Jaguars finished, get the best pick.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that was just so weird was like the Harrison trade really didn't need to happen for this team to be bad, No, and that's still a pretty valuable asset that you're trading for basically nothing. And And, if Ngakoue is on the market, it should, warrant a little bit more than what they got for him too, I felt like. So I just thought that they sold low on all this just because they wanted to be really bad and ensure they got the number one pick, where they probably could have got the number one pick by keeping Harrison and holding on to that asset.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's also crazy. Jaguars, has it ever happened before a team wins the first game and then loses out?
I don't know. We'll have to get, what is it, Elias Sports Bureau on that?
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll work on that. All right. Final division. You got the AFC West. Where are you going here?
All right. AFC West. I will start with the Los Angeles Chargers, the artist formerly known as San Diego. Brian Bulaga and Trey Turner. I know they dealt with some injuries. I tried to avoid them, but I thought there were some things that worked well for this Chargers team, and I felt like they felt good about things. I just felt like, these two guys, even when they were on the field, weren't very good. I just thought that was frustrating in that regard for them. And, that's a heavily invested offensive line on those two that didn't pan out. And I think that's something that they're going to have to change. And they did address the offensive line because it was frustrating last season, even though Herbert was still good around it. But yeah, I didn't think those two were very good, even when they were on the field, which is why I ended up putting them as most disappointing.
Yeah, I don't hate that either. They dealt with some injuries as well. They're another one of those teams that it never doesn't deal with injuries, it seems. So You could also, I think you could throw Anthony Lynn in here as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he's in the conversation. I thought he was on the hot seat before the season, and he kind of backed that up. He probably was my number 2 pick, but yeah, I just felt like there was a heavy investment on the offensive line with Bulaga and Turner, and those guys didn't work out, and that's something you got to dock.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, 3 teams left. Which one's next?
I'll go with the Chiefs here. Once again, I didn't want to put injuries, so I didn't put the offensive line at the end of the season because it's like you can't hate the guys for getting hurt. You can't blame Duvernay Tardif for going to be a doctor for a season.
Right.
There's not really a whole lot to hate on that. I went with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is a guy who had a ton of expectations. First-round running back. They felt like they were running back away from being basically the complete football team, which they, virtually were for a lot of parts, because I think people thought the weakest part about the Chiefs heading into the season was the linebacking core and the secondary with, Breeland and Fenton getting out to start the year. Fenton getting out to start the year. And the secondary held its own. The linebacking core actually impressed a little more than I thought. Not that they were like top 5 or anything, but I thought they were good enough. Edwards-Helaire had a ton of expectations as the number 32 pick, filling in for this offense. He was, going crazy in fantasy drafts, crazy high in those, and he was fine. And, I thought fine wasn't really what they were looking for with the number 32 pick and getting that first running back off the board. They expected a little bit more, and I think he is going to get better. I think a lot of it had to do with them not trusting him in blocking situations, similar to, Keyshawn Vaughn. And I think he is going to get better, but at the same time, I did think some of it was disappointing. Yeah,
I think that's fair. I also think that it was weird. It added to disappointment that he had this big first game and then didn't, his best game was week 1. So that kind of added a little bit there. And I also thought it was just weird that it just seemed like they didn't trust him in moments. So, like the Super Bowl is the great example. Tampa Bay's playing cover 2 and they're still not running the football. Like, I think that's when you start running.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't, I just felt like that when they wanted to throw the ball, he wasn't on the field. Because they could, although he led the running backs in receptions, it felt like, obvious passing or scripted passing plays for him. They were getting him on the field, but they didn't trust him to stand in and block or throw a chip in there if he needed to. That's why Williams and even Le'Veon Bell came on the field at those moments. They didn't trust him in those situations, like you said, and it hurt.
Yeah. All right. Raiders or Broncos?
I'll go the Broncos first. This one just felt obviously like Drew Lock. This is a guy that I think we were both high on in the offseason. This was another one you could have obviously put injuries, and that was frustrating. But I didn't want to put injuries because I felt like that's a cop-out. This was a guy, like I said, though, Lock had some expectations after a solid end of the season, but it was very, scripted and, like I said before the season last year, I wanted to see Lock with the training wheels taken off. And this wasn't very good for the training wheels taken off. I thought he was good in improvisation moments, but just as a, stand in the pocket, make the throw quarterback, he didn't look like an NFL player. So I think he's probably on his way out.
Yeah, and I mean, they put a lot of investment in Drew Lock, and it has not worked out for him. I mean, this was a very disappointing year. They gave him a shot this year to see what can you do, and it wasn't great. And again, in young players, young quarterbacks in today's NFL, you got to get good quickly because you don't have time to wait around and see how good they're going to be.
Yeah, and Vic Fangio's probably on the way out because the quarterback thing didn't work out for him. I think he has some issues beyond just the quarterback was bad, but at the same time, it also doesn't help your team when your quarterback's not performing to a level that's going to put you in the position to win.
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate there. All right, let's finally get to the Raiders. We spent a while saving the one that people will certainly be looking for last. I made just so people understand how the thumbnail works. I made the thumbnail, but then I kind of thought afterwards, like, well, why did I make a thumbnail for the Raiders when I'm not the one picking them? So for all I know, Damon Arnett will have nothing to do with this. But where are you going here?
I didn't pick Damon Arnett, actually.
Okay.
Listen, I tried. I know you put a couple rookie corners on there. I tried not to put rookies unless it was like egregiously, it warranted it. And I think rookie corners have the toughest time to adjust. And I think even the most optimistic Raiders and Damon Arnett fan, which is probably you, probably thought at best this secondary was going to be maybe mid-tier at best, just because, it was a lot of young players adjusting to the game. And nobody loved Paul Gunther even before the season started. So I think that was frustrating for the Raiders fans, but I don't think it was the most disappointing thing because I went with Corey Littleton. This is a guy who got a pretty big contract in the offseason. Him and Kwiatkowski were supposed to fix this linebacking group. Kwiatkowski, I thought, lived up to expectations for his contract. And Littleton, who was this guy who was this outstanding cover linebacker, did not look the part of an outstanding cover linebacker in my book. I thought he struggled in coverage this year even. He missed 14 tackles this season, a career high, and he didn't really make any plays on the football this year. I thought he was frustrating overall, and that's why Corey Littleton was my most disappointing player.
This is a great pick. This is definitely a good one. And to be clear about what I was going to say, it was almost less about just Arnett in general and more about in my head when I made the thing. My pick was going to be just how poorly coached this defense was in coverage. So it is kind of that same thing of like, how many times did we see these guys just not communicating, not knowing what they're going to do? There's a simple route concept and they have no clue how to cover it. And then it happens 8 more times in the game and they make no adjustments. I mean, it was brutal last year and Littleton was absolutely a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, that it goes to the whole defense as a whole, and especially, the defensive coaching staff is also to blame for it. But yeah, I just felt like this was a guy who was supposed to come in and fix things, and he didn't, And while he, I think the secondary also deserves some of the blame in the coaching staff. The secondary is young and developing. Littleton was a guy they gave a big contract to expect this sort of adjustment, and it just wasn't there. And especially when Kwiatkowski, like I said, performed so well next to him, it's frustrating to see that as a Raiders fan, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree. And again, there's a lot of guys. Like Jonathan Abram, another guy who's second-year player. I think Pro Football Focus had him graded as the worst safety in the league last year. There was a number of guys that there was expectations for that did not do too well.
I didn't put Jonathan Abram because I hope he plays forever because that guy is easily the craziest football player I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
He's like Troy Polamalu, but all the bad things about Troy Polamalu. He's just all over the place in the wrong reasons. I hope he always plays. He's just all over the place, but nowhere near the ball sometimes.
Yes, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah. So, all right, I guess that's we got all 32 teams. We made good time here. Sometimes these things take like 2 hours trying to get through all 32 teams. We plowed through this.
Yeah, I ended up dipping below. Do you still have the basketball game up? Because I actually turned it off. So
I have it. It's about a minute. I mean, my stream might be a little bit behind because I'm on YouTube TV, but a minute 40 seconds left. It's a 10-point game.
Oh, yeah, it's over.
Yeah, not looking too great.
Yeah, what can you do? But yeah, so that's our show, I guess.
Yes, that's our show. Kyle, have you been keeping up with the NHL playoffs at all?
Yes, I hate the New York Islanders. This drives me nuts.
Them.
This team is. I hate Barry Trotz so much. I hope that he can't coach ever again after this season. I think that it's a problem that this team is not good. This team is so there's not a lot of talent on this team, but they're just so organized. I mean, that's the thing about Trot is his defense is always very organized, and that works for him. But it's just so frustrating to watch this team. And I just look at this team and the Bruins compared to the Islanders and say we're way more talented than this team, and yet it's 2-2. It's just frustrating to see.
Yeah. Luckily, the Lightning up 3-1. It would be fun if we could get another Bruins Lightning series. Good content could be made.
Yeah, we'll just bicker at each other the whole time. We'll see what happens.
Yes.
I mean, I still think the Bruins are going to win the series. What's up?
Did you see during the Lightning game yesterday, they had a special guest come on and during a commercial and cheer on the Lightning? Did you notice this?
No, who was it?
Is a Tampa Bay legend, Tom Brady, coming on saying, "Keep the cup in Tampa Bay where it belongs."
I don't want to talk about it.
Yes. All right. Well, we'll see if, a lot of good stuff next week. Still don't have an idea for the show. Tweet at us. Let us know if you have an idea for the show. Go on Twitter. We're open to suggestions for that kind of stuff. Kyle, let them know where they can find us again before we head out.
Yeah, if you have any show topics you want discussed, or if you just have a question that's a good question that you want discussed on the show next week, we'll take some questions maybe if there's good ones. You can tweet at Jackson Kruger. You could tweet at by Kyle Grondin, or you could tweet at On the Sideline JK. That's the Twitter account for this podcast. That's at On the Sideline JK on Twitter. Or if you have a good question, I guess comment it below too on the show. Any way you want to try and get your question to us, we'll start logging them and maybe track them for next week, or anything you want discussed as we head into get ready for the 2021 season.
Yes, exactly. All right. Again, thanks to everyone for watching. We appreciate it. We will be back next week probably at 5. It's the new time of the show. We can also, again, check out the audio only. We do appreciate you guys watching live or watching after the fact or listening. We appreciate it. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.
Peace.